Hey everyone, Jarek here. Before I start today's video, I have to thank our sponsor, Ray All In Games. I cannot wait to see how angry people are preemptively in the YouTube comments. So All In Games contacted me around a week and a half ago about their new early access title, Arboria. Click the link down below in the video information if you want to check out this game on Steam. I get a lot of these emails and I typically ignore them for one of two reasons. The first one is that it's just an indie game that generally isn't too far along yet, and the last thing I want to do is just kind of rail an indie title from some developer that's trying his best. But the second thing is that those games are so out there, it makes me question, why in the world do you think I would ever play them? Why would I make a video about wine making simulator? What? Arboria caught my eye though, because clearly it's a lot more ambitious than what I usually find in my inbox. It looks to be a well done game, so I figured why not give it a shot. This game is a bit different than what I usually cover on this channel. It's a Souls-like procedurally generated roguelite. Now I know there's a lot of roguelites around in early access, but the combat is what caught my eye, and it definitely stands out from the others. I'm getting a little too ahead of myself here. Let's stick to my usual format. Let's talk about the graphics first, and go from there. Graphically, this game isn't necessarily the world's best looking thing, but keep in mind this is made from a small indie studio. This looks a lot better than most indie games you see in early access. And while it's far from looking like the world's best game, it's also far from looking bad. What it lacks in graphics, it makes up aesthetically. It's clear the artists were liking what they were doing in this game because the characters are bizarre. This is a good thing because you play as what is called a Jotun, and when you die, you can get another one. Every character looks different, so the art style really needs to carry this game. But the art style carries over to everything. The NPCs walking around in the hub world, the enemies, of course the Jotun you play as, and the weird fairy creature that follows you around. This fairy creature looks more like a fairy witch mix, if anything else. This game is one of those good examples where an art style can definitely carry the look of a game. There's nothing wrong with not pushing video game graphics forward, you just need your game to look pleasing to the eye. Skipping forward to the story, we don't necessarily have all the details as this game is still in early access, but from what I can gather, you play as the villain right at the beginning of the game. This is clever in a way because while the game is explaining this character, it's also giving you a tutorial of the background. This is useful because you only have to play it once and then it won't affect any of your other playthroughs with any of your other characters. Anyway, to give you the too long didn't read, at the end of the tutorial your character puts on a hat that seemingly is cursed and makes him lose his mind. The best analogy I can come up with is that it kind of reminds me of Majora's Mask. In fact, the general tone of this game kind of reminds me of Majora's Mask. The fairy that was following that main villain goes back to the hub world, reports what was going on, and from here, you get to choose the Jotun that you get to play as. As is the case with most roguelites, you get to choose between numerous different characters. All have different stats and abilities. They grow off of a branch and then fall out of a tree fetus. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm intrigued. From here you can go into the dungeons. Your Jotun has some personality, for better or worse, so it is nice to have a character that actually has some character. In fact, there's a few extra tiny things. For example, you can choose a character that may just get 20% more health, or you can choose a character that's colorblind. It doesn't help you, in fact it hinders you, and I don't know why you choose that, but it's there for you to choose, and I like that it exists. Again, it adds some personalities to Jotun that would otherwise feel like clones. I mean hell, I came across one of these who had a trait of fuck the perks, I'm badass. Anywho, once you go deeper into the dungeons, you can see that original villain talking, and I get the feeling that something more is happening here, but we're not really shown quite yet. Again, the game is still in early access, so not everything is in the game. Okay, now we can talk about the combat because the combat is really carrying this game. That's not to say the rest of the game is bad, but the clear focus for the early access release was to have a robust combat system in place to build on. And this surprised me because I didn't actually think it would be as good as it is. I used an Xbox One controller, keep in mind. Right bumper is a light attack, right trigger is a heavy attack, left bumper is the light attack with your special ability, left trigger is the heavy attack with your special ability, X is to use one of your health potions, you only have 3, Y is to use some of the special attack items that you can come across. I only came across one, and these were spikes I could summon out of the ground. These have limited uses, I could only use the spikes I think 5 times. Pushing down on the left analog stick will make you sprint, pushing down on the right analog stick will make you lock onto enemies, and last but not least, pressing the B button will make you dodge. This is more interesting than just a dodge roll though, as if you tap it, you'll do a sidestep, but if you hold the button down or double tap it, you'll do a roll. Vast majority of the time, sidestepping is a lot more effective. It has way less end lag and it puts you in a position where you can attack back. That said, if you start panicking, you might double tap the button and roll, and you're probably going to get punished. I know it's lazy journalism to talk about a game being Souls-like, but that's honestly the best way I can describe the combat here. The base combat system is in a really good spot. There's enough to learn to where it doesn't feel stale and too simple, and it's responsive, so if I died, it was my fault. Of course, it's a roguelite though, and there has to be a bunch of different weapons and abilities you can use, and there is. The weapons are symbiotic, they're part of your arm, so it's interesting to see your arm go from an axe to a giant sword. As of right now, there's 3 types of weapons. There's a scythe, which is the fastest but least damaging type, there's the sword, which does the most amount of damage but is the slowest, and the axe is in between. Of course, they can have different stats and traits to them. For a while, I was using a weapon that had the sharp ability, which did more damage to armored enemies. I eventually swapped that out when I found a sword that did the same amount of damage, but it stole health from them and gave it to me. There's a bunch of different armor sets that work in a similar way. The armor can be light, medium, or heavy. This affects how fast you move and how much damage you'll take. And last but not least are these special abilities. There's 3 special abilities in the game as of right now. The first one is Shockwave, which does as you would expect. You either slam the ground, having an area of effect attack, or you can do the heavier, more focused attack. Next is the shield. It's a shield. I personally didn't care for this one all that much. And the last is Teleport. This seems like it would be very useful to get away when you need to, or even to close a gap to get some more hits in. Personally myself, I preferred Shockwave to have some extra damage. I pretty much focused on doing damage entirely, and my character ended up being a heavy tank that could hit really hard. There's also sort of a nature triangle. Fire beats ice, ice beats nature, nature beats fire? Yeah, this didn't make sense to me either. I think they should change nature to ground, because I would have to stop every once in a while and double take thinking, alright, nature beats what? Because nature shouldn't beat fire. If it was ground, that makes sense. Fire would beat ice, ice would beat ground, ground would beat fire. Anyway, this is important. Your special abilities can have these elements to them, and they can counter other enemies with those elements. And since you don't have to do anything to make your special abilities recharge, you're encouraged to use them as much as you can, and that's a lot. If you have a fire element and there are ice enemies around, use your fire special abilities. Don't hold on to that special attack, because again, it recharges pretty quickly. But there's also one thing I've neglected to mention. That sidestep I was talking about earlier, you can cancel your attacks by using that sidestep. In fact, you can cancel about anything with this sidestep. If you're trying to use a health vial and an enemy shows up out of nowhere, you can just sidestep and cancel it. This adds an extra layer to the combat. You can do your special ability, cancel that, do a heavy attack, cancel that into a weak attack. The strong and weak attacks also have their own sort of combo trees in them. You can do a light attack, light attack, and that will be different than just pressing light, 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 or heavy, heavy, light. Like, I can't stress this enough, the combat system avoided feeling like you were just playing a button masher. More thought goes into it than just mashing a button until that enemy dies. But okay, what's your main goal moving throughout these dungeons? It's a roguelite, so a lot of it is just trying to get better gear. You'll find new weapons and abilities scattered throughout the maps, and you'll also find chests that are closed down that you'll have to defend so that you'll be able to open them. These chests generally have 2 to 4 things inside of them. You'll also want to break open these blue crystals, which will give you Very, which is this game's currency. Oddly enough, the fairy collects this Very, and as you pick up more, this happens.
That's a huge bitch!
This game has some character to it, but it actually does more than just being weird and amusing. You see this character getting more fat, this means you have more currency, and you don't want to die because that means you lose it, so you can physically see how much you have, rather than just a big number. One more thing to do throughout these dungeons is to heal roots. You fend off numerous waves and then the root is healed. You heal enough roots and this unlocks certain things in the hub world above. In between each floor of the dungeons you get a chance to drop your Very off, which is really useful because again, you will lose it if you die. Yes, please vomit that up for safekeeping. And you also get the ability to upgrade the stats of your character. If you die, which you will, you'll see an interesting cutscene. You choose your new Jotun, and then you get judged by a god. This god may be unhappy or happy. You have a chance to give him more Very here. This will make him happier and make your stats better. But typically I found that if I was doing well in the dungeons, he was already pretty happy with me. Other than that, there are 2 other shops in the hub world that you can use this currency on. The first one upgrades your weapons, the second one upgrades your special abilities. As of right now, that's all there really is in the hub world, but there's clearly more that is going to be added here. Again, it's in early access, stuff will be added on, yada yada. I do have some criticism though. Just because they're sponsoring me doesn't mean I'm not going to do that. The first one is that there's not really a whole lot of content here yet, but again, it's in early access, so can this really be a negative? What is here is a really good base for what can be in the future. If this is your style of game, you're still going to enjoy it. So that leaves my only complaint being that all the dungeons kind of look really similar. They are procedurally generated, but it's kind of the same looking cave rooms over and over again. Yeah, the layout is different, but it would be nice to see something else. Just some different textures, maybe have some icy, snowy rooms, maybe have some rooms full of lava, stuff like that. Roguelites inherently are going to be a bit repetitive, that's kind of just in their nature, so giving me something different to look at goes a long way. But honestly, that's just kind of it. As I said, this game has a really good base as of right now, and the combat feels better than most other games, surprisingly. In conclusion, if this is your style of game, you should at least put it on your Steam wishlist and keep an eye on it. Thanks again to All In Games for sponsoring this video. You can check a link to their game down below in the video information if any of this interests you. Thank all of you guys for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.